High energy doesn't always mean a dog is confident. And sometimes the dogs who look the most driven are the ones quietly masking their stress. Welcome to The Dog Who Asked for More, a podcast for dog parents navigating the messy, complicated parts of life with dogs that no one really prepares you for. Each week, you'll hear honest, grounded conversations that help you better understand your dog, feel more confident in your choices, and strengthen the relationship you're building together. There's a moment some dog parents reach where everything feels more difficult than it should. You're walking more, training more, trying harder, and somehow it still feels tense. Not chaotic, not dramatic, just wrong. And that's the part people don't talk about because it's easier to believe your dog just needs more work, more enrichment, more structure, more time with you. But sometimes the pressure isn't coming from effort. Sometimes it's coming from fit. I'm Em, a dog mom, retired vet tech turned dog trainer, and canine nutritionist who works with overwhelmed dog parents who love their dogs deeply but feel stuck, burned out, or unsure what their dog actually needs. And today we're looking at something that can feel uncomfortable to name: the difference between a dog who's asking for clearer communication and support and a dog who simply doesn't align with the life they're living in. And sometimes the only way to understand the difference is by learning to pay closer attention to what the dog in front of you is actually telling you. So, Amber, let's start at the beginning. Would you tell me about the first job or assignment that you ever gave to Whiskey?
Ooh, the first job. So when you say job, I'm like, oh, her first acting job she got hired for. But what our dogs do at home is also a job for them too. To be honest, when she was a puppy, I never fed her without training her or using puzzle toys. From the day she came home, every meal was training time. For dogs, training can be a job for them, which is really, really helpful when you have a high drive, high energy dog where they want to burn that mental energy. Because sometimes I think we think a job is herding or retrieving or all the things dogs are bred for. But sometimes a dog finds their job to be something that they do at home with you, like training. So from the day she came home, 8 weeks old, she was training every single day for her meals.
A lot of people miss how important routine is. Dogs really thrive when they know what's coming next. They are totally fine existing in their day as long as they can kind of follow the pattern. In today's modern world, with kids and people working from home, coming and going, lots of activities and things like that, it can be really difficult to stay in those routines.
That's where I think enrichment is a huge, easy way for us to give them those outlets and those jobs in our busy days. Using enrichment in your routine is really good. But another example of a job, which I always teach my dogs who tend to be more needy, needing jobs, needing things to do, is if they steal something and they bring it to me instead of destroying it, I reward them. That was something really early on when puppies steal things. I teach them like, oh, you found a bag full of treats. If you bring it to me, I'll open it and give you a treat. And like you said, that actually creates a routine for dogs. They have this expectation of, if I bring them something, I get rewarded. Now, it does get annoying when you're 24/7 having a dog bring you things. But personally, I would prefer a dog to bring me the item that she's going to shred or consume so I could check on it first. And that's something that's like an easy thing to incorporate in our everyday life, that sometimes she brings me things I don't really want, but I'd prefer that over eating it.
And eating it can cause complete and total other problems, right? You don't want to end up at the vet. It's not fun when your dog is in medical distress. So if you can teach them to do something more helpful, that's
Mhm.
definitely the way to go. Now, Whiskey has lots of things that she does. She acts, she does sports, she is doing trick stuff, and then she's also a service dog. What
Yeah.
order did those things come in?
Wow, that's such a good question. I actually lose track of all the things that she does because it's kind of our everyday life. And one thing I definitely want to touch on before the order is that when I actually got her and I had the intention to bring her home, my goal was for her to be able to do tricks, sports, performances, and service work. And that is a really big ask for one dog. My other dog, Oakley, he's just the steadiest dog in the world, and I adopted him to be my service dog. And so when I got Whiskey, I had already in my mind known that yes, I want a dog that can train up to be the replacement of my current service dog, but I want a dog that also can do all of the things. The great thing about training service dog work really early on when you have a puppy is that it's pretty much just creating a confident dog. And so I didn't have any intentions of doing 100 tricks by 10 weeks old or doing a sports by a certain age or getting service work done at this certain age, because my number one goal bring her home was just create a dog that feels confident in anything that she does. And that was the only thing that I planned to do. I had no timeline on sports or acting or anything like that.
Where people get lost is they don't understand the difference between a dog who can handle that much versus a
Mhm.
dog who's actually overwhelmed. Can you talk about the difference between the two?
Yeah, before like looking at the types of dogs, whether they can handle it or not, evaluating your current dog is really important. But then if you also have future goals for future dogs, knowing what it is that you're looking for. If you want a dog that can handle doing all those things, maybe your current dog isn't the best suited dog for that. And that is actually the position that I was in before I got Whiskey. So my first dog, his name was Tucker. I wanted him to be that dog. I wanted him to do all the things, to do all the tricks, to do all the sports, to be a service dog. And I tried for a really long time. I tried probably longer than I should have. I was a newer trainer, but at some point I had to like come to the realization that he did not have the temperament to do all of those things in a way where he felt comfortable. So it does take a lot for a dog to be able to be a service dog. It takes very specific types of temperaments of dogs. The dog has to be steady in any environment. They have to be willing to work for their person in crazy, situations that majority of dogs don't go in every single day. And when it comes to a dog that wants to do sports, you also need a specific type of dog. You need a dog that really wants to engage with you, that has the energy level that they want to continue working even if they are distracted. Now, I truly believe any dog can do tricks, but it does take a very specific type of temperament or a type of energy level for a dog that wants to perform. And so I really wanted a dog that we would go out somewhere, wants to do tricks with me, wants to do stuff with me wherever we go. And that is why I got Whiskey, because Tucker had the energy level and he had the drive and the devotion to me, but he had a lot of anxiety. Everywhere we went, it was like the world kind of closed in on him and he was just super overwhelmed by the environment in general. And that dog was like my whole world. He's my heart, but he was not suited for all the things I wanted to do. And that's why I adopted Oakley, because I really needed a service dog. And the dog that I had, even though he wanted to train with me all the time and do all the things, he was not really that steady. I could handle anything under pressure temperament. And when I met Oakley, he was 2.5. He was just like the chillest, easiest guy. He was a really good dog that had just not given the right chance. And so I knew I could give him that chance. But when I adopted him, I knew he wasn't going to be that competitive sport dog that I really wanted. If we did agility, he would do it. But it looks very different doing agility with like a big doofy dog versus like a little sport dog. And so Oakley had the temperament and the stability and the energy level to be the perfect service dog. But he did not have the energy level or drive to be the perfect performance trick or sport dog. And it's interesting because you see sport dogs all the times in agility frisbee, and those dogs, they want to go for frisbees. They want to work, 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 work. And it's really hard to find that and take it to go to a service dog where you usually see like a calmer lab who can just hang out all day. And I knew that when I was looking for a new dog, that was going to be my goal. And I didn't know if it was going to be possible. Now, Whiskey's not perfect, but she fits that mold pretty well where like she really, really wants to work, but she also can like be that calm, steady service dog. However, if I had gotten her just to be the calm, steady service dog, she would be set up for failure because she does have that, like, I want to work. I want to play frisbee. I want to go. And I'm telling you now, if she was with somebody else, she could possibly be a reactive dog. She could be a fearful dog because she does have those tendencies. And so it's not necessarily about getting the right dog, but it's also setting them up for success too, putting them in the environment where they succeed. And she's a dog that she's settling here right now. But if she lived with someone who did not train and work her, she would drive them absolutely insane.
I can believe it. I've seen some of those sports dogs who are pretty intense and
Mhm.
they want to work. They want to be active and they want to be involved, and yes, they have their times where they can chill out and be part of the family, but for the most part they like their regimen, they like the routine, and that's their drive. That's their fun. They love it. So tell me a couple of things about whiskey that you see from your perspective, the mom owner perspective, that explain how those are confidence. People mistake confidence for fear sometimes because they can look very similar. So explain the difference and what that looks like in whiskey.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And it's something that I was not as good at early on in my training career. So if you're testing level of is this dog taking treats or is the dog working for treats, that's not enough to prove that the dog is feeling confident in that environment. So what I want to see specifically from whiskey or from dogs in general is if something happens in the environment, do they fixate on it? Do they like feel like they need to check on it? Do you see that shift of like they're still thinking about whatever's going on around them? A really good example of this is one thing that Whiskey seems to struggle with a little bit that I'm fully aware of that she's like more likely to pay more attention to. And it's if someone goes by her with a skateboard, she wants to go and check on that skateboard or chase it or bark at it. And she has a tendency to be like, I'm going to get that. And I know that a little that is rooted in like the high drive and wanting to do things, but a little bit I could tell is rooted in the fact that it concerns her slightly when there's something rolling behind her. And I can easily tell that because whenever that's around in the environment, I could see her choosing to check in on it every so often. So she's aware of where it is. If a dog is truly confident, and it's funny because again, my other dog, Oakley, he's like the sweetest thing in the world, but like he's the most oblivious dog I've ever met in my entire life. Like, and it's like oblivious, but like oblivious confidence because nothing bothers him. Like he's just like, oh yeah, cool, whatever. And then he forgets that it exists. So when I'm out with Whiskey and if I want to see if she's really confident in the environment, I want her to be like, oh, there's a gazillion weird things around here, but I'm not going to give any of them the time of day. I'm going to focus on working with you or playing with you. And the way that I really instilled that in her from the get-go was not with treats, but with play. People a lot of times overlook that play, like a fearful dog is not going to play. So the best way to combat a dog who's feeling anxious or maybe a little bit fearful is to play with them because it immediately changes their mindset. It immediately changes their body language. They start moving and they're like, oh, this is great. But a lot of times what people do with dogs who might feel a little bit insecure is they use treats. And treats are great. Don't get me wrong. I'm a mega treat trainer. If you like, I do use treats all the time. But a dog could take a treat and then immediately go back to what they're concerned about. So if Whiskey had a skateboard going back and forth behind her and she looks at the skateboard and I tell her, good girl, and I give her a treat, that's going to help. But what is she going to do after she eats that treat? She's probably going to go back to looking behind her. Now, it's not that she's being reactive. It's not that she's cowering in fear, but I want that confidence of you don't have to worry about that or think about that at all. So in that moment, the best thing I could do for her is get her to play. Because if she can play with me, then a lot of times she's going to forget about what's going on over there because play is so motivating and it gets all those happy feelings. So that's what I've done with her since the moment she came home is we go to new environments, we play. And if I only have food, I'll play with the food too. Toss the food, we do tricks with the food. I throw the food so she runs and gets it and then throw the food that way. So she's in a zone with me rather than thinking about the environment. Then I know that she's feeling confident in that environment.
Love that because Fitz is the same way. But he's watching, they see me throwing the ball and they see me sitting here playing tug with him. He is a nervous dog and he recalibrates through play. He loves to play. He loves his ball, and anywhere that ball is, he's generally very comfortable. There are many, many times, because I'm a mega treat giver too, where I can try to give him a treat and he'll just drop it or walk away from it or
Yep.
not even try to catch it because he's too concerned about the other thing that's happening. But you get a ball out and everything changes. It's such a overlooked topic. There's so many different training modalities. There really are. And treats do work. They do, but sometimes they don't. So it's knowing what that alternate switch is for your dog.
hmm
Knowing your dog is such an important factor of that. A lot of people just don't know how to get curious about
hmm
figuring out what that is. So give some tips on maybe how to find a favorite toy or a favorite trick or some kind of pattern that's reliable to help their dog fall back into a calmer state of mind.
All the three things you just said. I love to do pattern games when we go places, which I think is so helpful for the dog to know what's expected of them there. I find that if you're doing tricks as a way to get your dog's feelings and to make them feel more confident, it's really important that we get movement in there. A sit is not going to suffice. What we really want is the dog to be moving their body, get those wiggles out. I actually taught Whiskey how to shake off her body on cue. So I do this and she shakes off her whole body. And I use it all of the time because it's ways that dogs naturally release their stress. Is it's like a right, which makes us feel better. And for a dog, shaking off their body is great. So if you don't have a shake off on cue, then using behaviors like tossing treats back and forth. If your dog doesn't want to play with toys, I understand some dogs like toys more than others. You can play with food. So a really easy pattern game that you could do when you go to a new place is start off with your dog in front of you and make sure you have the leash in a place where you're not gripping the leash, but the leash can stay loose. It could either be on your arm, underneath your foot, something like that, and toss a treat to the right. As soon as they get it, mark that, toss it to the left, and do that like 5 times in a row. Toss the treat, toss the treat, toss the treat. And then what you'll see is when they pick up the next treat, they're going to look up to you. And that's what we want. We want the dog to pick up the treat, look up to you, pick up the treat, look up to you. And then as soon as they engage with you and not the environment, then ask them to spin. If they spin, throw the treat and have them chase it again. The biggest thing to remember is when you're doing these things to base it off of your dog. So if your dog is still checking out the environment, that might be too overwhelming of an environment for that dog. Start that pattern game of chasing the treat back and forth just right outside. And if that's too much, practice it inside first. Get them used to this pattern game of where they know the expectation and they're having fun. Doesn't matter if it's a toy, doesn't matter if it's food. What matters is your dog is having fun. And we want your dog to think that they can have fun with you in every single environment. That is key. When it comes to toys, I have a secret that worked for Whiskey because she does love toys, but she's not a ball crazy dog. Like she would not play ball like that. She's a retriever, which is crazy. You'd think she'd be doing this all day, but she doesn't. She's like has to be motivated for herself. I got toys that have rabbit fur tied in them, and that was completely a game changer for her. The second that there was rabbit fur in the toy, she just lit up and went crazy. And so now those are our special agility toys that we use when I really want to get that like crazy side out of her. Sometimes it's experimenting. Maybe you need to have some rabbit fur in your pocket to see that crazy side of your dog.
That's a great tip. Again, curiosity, experimenting, really getting in there and figuring out what it was that turned that go on. It's different for every dog, and it's really important to figure out what that is because, man, that motivation factor changes everything. And since we're talking about that, let's talk about the difference between like a high energy, highly motivated dog versus a dog who's emotionally stable under pressure because there's a big difference there.
Yeah, absolutely. When you have a dog who's highly motivated and high energy and they're just willing to do anything for a ball, for instance, it's so easy to mask confidence, thinking that that is a confident dog, when in reality, they are ignoring the environment. But if you take that toy away, how is the dog feeling? I did mention earlier, that's one of the ways I check to see how my dog is feeling is if they're ready to play with me, if they're still checking out the environment, if we're working together and they're still observing things around them. But that is the key, being able to remove that motivation and seeing how the dog actually feels. And a lot of times a dog's confidence comes from the object itself or the motivation itself. And so that is a false confidence that we have to make sure we're not pushing dogs past their limit. Perfect example of this is my dog Tucker, who was a more anxious dog. He was fearful of strangers, fearful of new environments, and I could get him to mask how he was feeling anywhere because he loved food. So he would take food from a stranger, but did he feel good about that stranger? Absolutely not. And so it's really important that we sometimes take away those things and really like strip down to see how our dog is feeling and focus in on how they are feeling before we bring out those high motivators because they can mask the true feelings. And learning is not happening when your dog is masking feelings. They'll be like, I'm just going to take the treats because it's keeping me distracted from what's actually bothering me. Or I'm just going to chase this ball because then I don't have to think about the beeping cars that are outside. Now, your dog could get habituated to those sounds and to those things through motivation. But I think it's so important to like strip it down and see how our dog is feeling without those things there and then train up to getting to that place. Very often dogs that are really highly motivated are often not emotionally stable because a lot of times the dogs like my dog Oakley, who's a super emotionally stable dog, he's not very food motivated. He's not very toy motivated. And it is easier for me to tell that he's just okay with the environment. And I think it's harder to tell with the highly motivated dogs because they will mask it so that they can get the thing they want. My dog Tucker will take treats from strangers, but if you go to pet him, he's like, whoa, don't touch me. So with those dogs, we have to take extra steps, gradually increasing the things that might be triggers for them and maybe reducing the motivation for them a little bit so we can see a little bit more of how they actually feel rather than whatever they're masking.
Dogs are so crazy about masking, whether it's their emotional state or their pain. They're just really good at kind of hiding the truth. And I know that that's like a built in instinct. They're trying not to show their weaknesses to the world.
It can be tricky too because so many dogs, not all, but so many dogs are highly motivated to please us and to appease us. And so a lot of times dogs will put up with things and mask things because they want to make sure their person is happy about the situation. So when it comes to the actual welfare of our dog and the way that they're feeling, we have to try and remove the way that we feel about it sometimes too. And like just observe the dog for being a dog. And it's so much easier to do this as a trainer when you're looking at someone else's dog. But when it's your own dog, it's so much harder to actually see it. Sometimes the best thing you can do is have an outside view looking in, have the professional trainer who's really well versed in body language, observe your dog with video content or in person. And sometimes that can help you a lot because it can be very hard emotionally when it's your dog. And I know with my dog Tucker, like it took me too long to realize that I was pushing him. It's really important sometimes to look at, is that fair to your dog to put them in that environment? And I had big dreams of competing in agility for him, big dreams of like him being my service dog. But when we were in those environments, I had to be like, okay, you know what? He's not feeling good here. So our priorities shifted and my goals for him shifted. And that was the kind of dog that he was until, the day that he passed. Sometimes we have to just kind of learn to be like, okay, this is how my dog feels, and I'm going to meet them where they're at.
I agree with you. Something you said there sparked something, making sure our dogs are okay and checking in on how they feel. But there's something else that plays into that, which is recovery time and decompression.
Yeah.
And so getting our dogs to reset after that stress. Can you explain why that's important and what that looks like for a dog?
Yeah, a huge part of recovery time and resetting is making sure that your dog has the time to process whatever environment they were just in, especially if they're not used to it. So, like at an agility trial where dogs are barking like crazy, it's really easy for us to be like all worked up and anxious about the trial itself, but we're not always realizing that the dog is experiencing tons of smells, tons of noises, tons of environmental stimuli. And that alone can make your dog really exhausted. Obviously, everyone's different, but like for me, going to a mall is like my worst nightmare. Like I cannot go to a mall because the lights, the people, like the busyness, and I will like fall asleep after going to a place like that because I'm so drained. And I didn't physically do anything. I just like walked around. But that's the type of thing we have to keep in mind for our dogs. So imagine when your dog goes to these environments, they also have a whole nother level of like a world that we can't even process, which is smell. And so when you go to any new environment, your dog is taking in all this information. They're also taking in a world that we can't comprehend. So we have to give them that time to be able to process that information, especially at big events. Global Pet Expo is a really huge example of that. And I want my dog to be on her best behavior, but the only way she's going to be able to do that is if she does have that time to herself to be able to decompress and to rest, because even though she might just be walking around, it is not just the physical that we're looking at. It's the mental, it's the stimulation visually, the sounds, the smells, people greeting your dog. Imagine going to a party and 100 people say hi to you. That's overwhelming too. So we have to be able to come down and strip it down a little bit more and be like, wow, each of those little levels is a lot for my dog to take in. And even if you're not going to a huge event like Global Pet Expo, sometimes just going to the pet store or sometimes just going on a walk for some dogs is really overwhelming. And so they do need that time to be able to not only rest, but decompress. And you can absolutely help your dog decompress faster. When your dog comes back from a walk or comes back from an environment, give them a snuffle mat on their bed, decompress a bit, then rest and kind of like let it all sink in.
I love how you stated that, how it's more layered for dogs because I have social anxiety. I have anxiety in general. And so going to an event like Global, where there's
Mhm.
millions of people around you, there's dogs everywhere, there's all kinds of lights and sounds and moving parts because all the booths are lit up. I don't take my dogs because one,
Mhm.
Fitz is not the kind of dog that's built for that situation. But two, I cannot imagine having to deal with him when I'm trying to deal with myself and managing both of us. Just is that stuff not good for anybody. And like you said, the sounds are much louder, the smells are way more overpowering for them. And so we see the world with our eyes, but they see it in multiple different ways. So it can be very, very overwhelming for everyone. It's a choice to take a dog, but you do have to be prepared for that. And then you do need to help your dog come down after that because it really, really is a lot.
Yeah, and no matter where you're going with your dog, because every dog is so different and their confidence levels are going to be different, their experience levels are going to be different. You always need to have a plan of what you're going to do if your dog needs to get out, if they need more space, if they need more time. An easy example of this is I took Whiskey to an agility trial years ago, and in my head I'm anxious about all this stuff, and of course my dog also feels the feelings and the body language I'm giving off. And when we got out there, she's just sniffing the floor and she's just not engaging. It was too much for her. She knows how to do agility, but the environment was too exciting. The environment was too stimulating. My nervousness probably affected how she was feeling too. So what was my plan? I went back to what we talked about earlier is I just played with her. I had zero expectations at that point. This is not going to go the way that I hoped it would go. So what is my plan in this? My plan in this moment is to make sure she has a good impression and then we leave. I made sure the ring itself was not a stressful environment because if I would have just grabbed her and then walked out, that probably would have been a little bit stressful for her because she'd be like, wait, what happened? I didn't get to do anything. So we played, we had a good time. I told her she's great, leashed her up, and we left. It's really important to have a plan in those moments. If you're going out with your dog, if you're taking them to a store, what is your plan if your dog is showing you that they're not feeling super confident in that environment? As a pet owner, sometimes it could feel very frustrating and very discouraging, especially if you've been making progress and you're like, oh, I think we can do this. And then you get there and your dog is showing you, maybe I'm overwhelmed by this. So have a plan when you go places, have an out plan, have a training plan in place. And if things go great, awesome. But if they start to go in a different direction, just be willing to work with it because that's what our dogs really need from us.
I hope that the biggest takeaway from that whole thing was things do not ever go as we expect them to go with our dogs. Dogs are living, breathing beings with thoughts in their head. And while you have one idea, they might have a totally different idea. So just plan for every outcome. Such great advice. Before we wrap up, I want to pause for something that I call answering the ask. This is where behavior stops being something to stop fixing and starts being communication. Can you share a moment where Whiskey showed you she could either carry more or that she needed less, and what shifted when you listened?
Wow. That's a really good question. I want to give examples that are relatable to people because I feel like seeing a dog that acts on television or seeing a service dog or seeing a trick performing dog, a lot of people see those dogs and think like, oh yeah, they can do everything. I've had a lot of moments with Whiskey where I had to take it back a step. And I had a lot of moments with her where I was like, oh, wait, we're actually here now. And I think one of the harder things that I dealt with her was off leash reliability. She had always struggled to find me more motivating than the environment. And if she was on a leash, it was easy. But as soon as she was off leash, the environment was way better than me. And that was something I really, really struggled with her. Like I said previously, my training was really focused on her confidence and stability from day one. And we did a lot of trick training. And so when it came to progressing with tricks and confidence in new places, it was a little bit easier because I took it slower. But the off leash thing, I was not expecting a dog to just not want to be with me. We do all this stuff together. Why don't you want to hang out with me when you're off leash outside? And it took me really breaking it down, taking it all the way back to we do a couple of things off leash and you go back on leash. And so I had to go backwards with her a lot because I kept on trying to push her to be able to come to me off leash, able to play fetch off leash. And then when I gave her a little bit too much freedom, she would prove to me she wasn't ready for that yet. And so I really had to strip that down. And I think that's more relatable to people because I think everybody's had those moments. It's yeah, I want to be able to just take my dog to a park and play fetch. But as soon as I throw the ball, they're gone. And so I struggled with that a lot with her. And once I started making things smaller and taking baby steps towards progress, I started to see that she was proving to me that she was ready to have a little bit more freedom off leash. So, sounds dumb, but as a dog trainer, when I threw her the ball and we would just do 3 reps, and then when she would come back, I was very strict with her. Get the ball, come back, get the ball, come back, lie down, you're getting leashed up and back in the car. We did it like every other day. When she started offering that behavior without me having to like drill her through it, I started to be able to trust her a little bit more. I'll talk about a service dog example too. I knew Whiskey was ready for more pressure as a service dog when we were at Disney World. And then that's crazy to say, but we were at Disney World and I had her on, very strict management there because she was very young, her first time going. But if she could prove to me in this environment she's able to work with me, I think that we can start doing this in a lot of other environments too. Obviously, that's a more unrealistic environment for most pet parents to expect from their dog. But I had been training for that moment for a very, very long time. And so when she did show me that she was able to work in that type of environment and offer engagement, want to play with me, want to work with me, settle in that environment, recover quickly from spooky things that happened, that was a moment that I knew she can do this. And it's taken a long time to get there. I mean, she's not perfect. She's a lot of work. She's not the easiest dog in the world, but she is one of the best dogs I've ever had. And it's because I set her up for that success really early on. And I never expected her to be anything other than what she was.
Well, Amber, thank you so much for sharing everything with Whiskey about us today. And it's always so fun to get to see you while we're here at Global. For your final question, if someone listening is wondering whether they're pushing their dog too hard or maybe not hard enough, what would you want them to notice or remember?
Gosh, you got some good questions here. First of all, thank you for having me. And I'm stoked to be able to always spend extra time with you, especially because Global is crazy. Any extra time with you is well spent. Love that question because each of our dogs are such individual dogs that one thing could be a lot for one dog and for another, it's absolutely nothing. I think it really comes down to all the things that we talked about today. Number one, is your dog offering to work with you? Are they wanting to continue to work with you? Does your dog want to play with you in that environment? Does your dog keep checking out something in the environment? Is your dog able to reconnect with you if they disconnect with you? And so all of those things are things I'm going to look at whenever I'm going to make things a little bit harder, a little bit easier for my dog. What does the dog's recovery time look like? Is the dog seeing that happen, brushing it off and moving on to the next thing? Is the dog wanting to offer behaviors? Is the dog still choosing to work with you? I think all of those things are really important to look at with your individual dog and also knowing your dog, because my dog Oakley would not keep pushing me for working in behavior because he's a very low energy, low drive dog. But what does his recovery time look like when things in the environment happen? How easily is he engaging with me? How easily is he settling? How easily is he getting distracted? Those are all things to take into play when you're evaluating how your dog feels in the environment. Whether that be you're training them to be a service dog, whether that be you're working on reactivity, whether that be a dog that you're just trying to teach to be okay or just confident in environments. If I'm taking a puppy out in a new place, what I want to see from them is a puppy that wants to engage with me, that will work for me, whether that be food, treats, praise, attention, and a dog that if something in the environment changes, how quickly do they recover from that? How quickly do they show me that it was not a big deal? If at any point my dog is showing me, I don't know how I feel about that, or I'm not really into working right now, that's how I know I need to take a step back. And I need to make things a little bit easier for my dog, either what I'm asking the dog to do or the environment that we're working in.
Dogs don't always tell us what they need in obvious ways. Sometimes they ask for more. Sometimes they ask for less. And sometimes they're quietly trying to carry expectations that were never meant for them. The real skill is learning how to see the difference. Amber shared a lot of insight about confidence, motivation, recovery, and what it actually takes for a dog to thrive in demanding environments. But the biggest takeaway might be this: just because a dog can do something doesn't always mean that they should. When we learn to watch our dogs more closely and adjust what we ask of them, we give them the chance to succeed in ways that actually fit who they are. And that is where the real partnership starts. If your dog's behavior sometimes seems to come out of nowhere and you're not always sure what they're trying to tell you, the Dog Body Language Secrets quiz can help you start spotting subtle signals that show up before reactions. When we slow down and really pay attention to the dog in front of us, it becomes much easier to understand what they're capable and what they actually need. So be kind, spread joy, and remember, better decisions start with clearer information.